This bill makes the obscenely rich even richer.
The educator.
The big, beautiful bill.
That gorgeous, big, beautiful bill.
Most people hate this bill.
They think it's awful. They think it's horrible. It's a big, bad bill.
If you are rich, you are entitled to massive tax breaks. But if you are working class, you are entitled to nothing.
They told you this bill was written for the ultra wealthy. They told you that it was designed to help corporations pay zero while you were left footing the bill. And to be quite honest with you, they were right. Because it was written for commercial developers. It was written for the guys building skyscrapers and industrial complexes. But in their haste to pass it, they made a critical error. They left the back door open. And through that door, they accidentally invited a group of people they did not intend to invite. You, the everyday worker, the nurse, the engineer, the educator, the faithful people who sacrifice 15, 20, sometimes 25% of their money to Uncle Sam every single year. And for years, you've been told that tax breaks are reserved for millionaires and billionaires. But because of the specific way that they defined property in this rushed piece of legislation, well, you now have access to the same exact tax breaks and tax shields used by billionaires. Now, the media loves to call this a loophole, and they say that it sounds too good to be true, but it's not a loophole. It is a literal law in black and white, passed by Congress and signed by the president. And here's the thing, the law doesn't say skyscrapers. It says property with a useful life of 20 years. And guess what else has a useful life of less than 20 years? The furniture, the appliances, the flooring of a single family home, specifically of a short-term rental. And after studying this massive, controversial bill, I couldn't get these three questions out of my mind. Why is the most powerful wealth-building tool in America essentially invisible to the W-2 worker? Why does the government allow a paper loss to wipe out real income? And most importantly, if you knew the code, could you use this skyscraper tax break to wipe out the taxes on your W-2 income as an everyday 9-to-5 American? To answer that, we have to strip away all the jargon and go back to basics on how depreciation actually works. Let's start with the engine of this entire system, depreciation. If you buy a car for business, the IRS knows that it loses value. It wears down and eventually it becomes scrap. So they let you deduct those losses from your taxable income. Okay, that part makes sense. But real estate gains value. It appreciates. But the IRS doesn't really look at it that way. According to the tax code, a residential building is a, for lack of a better term, rotting asset. And they assume it has a useful life of 27 and a half years if it's a residential property, or if it's a commercial property, which an Airbnb is considered a commercial asset, then it depreciates over 39 years. And every single year, you get to tell the IRS, hey, my building is broken down, it's gotten worn and torn, it's less valuable. And as a result, you get a tax deduction. Okay, this is called a phantom expense. You didn't write a check, you didn't actually lose money, but on your tax return, it looks like you did. And for decades, these paper losses were a steady, boring way that landlords saved a little bit of money on their taxes every single year. Now, depreciation in and of itself is a fairly nuanced topic. So I sat down with my personal CPA, Matt Bontrager, to break down the concept of paper losses as simply as possible.
Yeah, paper losses obviously... It confuses people because first, the initial thought of going into a rental property or an investment is to make money. So, at first they think, well, why am I going to go into this to lose money? But the best part about this is you will still be cash flowing, so net positive on intake of cash, but on paper on your tax return, you're losing money. And here's how it works. Let's say that you buy a rental and you're cash flowing $100 a month even. That'd be $1,200 a year that you would have in cash flow that you would ultimately be profiting on that property. Rental income, your mortgage expense, commissions, cleaning expense, utilities, whatever the case is, you net $100 a month. But just as you said, in the IRS's eyes, this property is depreciating in value. So they're giving you a piece of that purchase price of the property as a deduction every year. So let's say that you get $10,000 in depreciation a year on this property. If it's a residential house, we know that it's 27 and a half years is the amount of time you will depreciate that property. So they're giving you a piece every, year for 27 years. Let's say on that property where you cash flow $100 a month, you really profit $1,200 a year, you get a $10,000 depreciation expense. Well, depreciation expense is an expense on your P&L that you ultimately give your accountant. And so if my P&L shows $1,200 of net income, but then I hit it with a $10,000 depreciation expense, what's happening? I'm technically losing $8,800 on paper there.
You're saying in this instance, like, you didn't actually lose $10,000.
No, exactly, right? I bought the property and now I'm just writing off a piece of that value every year. So whether I did a sub-2 deal and I got to buy that property, with no cash down, whether I put down a couple $100,000 to buy that property, whatever the case is, as long as I'm on the deed, I bought the property, I get to write off a piece of that. And so that $10,000 isn't really a cash expense. It's just an expense that I get on my tax return.
One of the interesting comments on my YouTube channel around this specific topic is that depreciation, while it seems like a magical thing, it actually is it's a real thing. And so what I mean by that is, yes, we are taking these losses from future repairs, even though they haven't happened yet. We're taking them today. But the actual idea with depreciation is, we might be losing $10,000 today, even if we're actually not. But isn't the general idea that we actually are going to lose that $10,000 for real at some point in the next 27 and a half years when we're talking about like a long-term rental?
See, that's a good concept, because I would say depreciation in respect to real estate is even better than other assets like a car, because you hear all the time, you buy a car, you drive it off the lot, you lose half the value. With a home, as we know, what's one of the next best qualities of real estate? It appreciates over time, unlike the car. So I would argue that $10,000 that you're writing off, yeah, at some point your property is going to need repairs, right? And you're going to have to put some money back into it. But overall, that asset is going to appreciate over time. So that's why it's even a larger benefit to invest in this asset class, is because while you own something that is increasing in value, on your tax return, you're getting to write it off. So the inverse is happening. You're using it as a tax tool to save money, but at the same time, it's growing in value to further grow your wealth.
Got it. So you're saying that the current system is set up in a way where your benefit from depreciation is actually greater than the monetary expense that you're going to spend to upkeep the property over the course of 27 and a half years?
Yes, given the tax benefits that it's bringing you, not only in year one, if you accelerate some of that depreciation, obviously, but yes, over the years that you own it as well. And the whole concept of this is overall, anything that you buy that has a long period of economic value to you is a long-lived asset. The IRS says you can't depreciate, you can't expense, whatever the case is, up front. Since you're getting a long-lived asset, you need to expense it over those years, and that's the concept behind it. Because the asset's going to last you so many years, you have to write it off over those years. And the IRS sets those term limits to say, cars, 5 years. Rental, 27 and a half. Commercial, 39.
But recently, the Big Beautiful Bill kind of changed this for a specific set of rentals, right?
Dramatically. Not even a specific set of rentals. Real estate, real property in general.
All right, so in this example, we have a $10,000 paper loss, like a phantom loss, if you will. We make $1,200 of net income, meaning that we have $8,800 left over in paper losses. So can we just use that paper losses to offset other things, like our other types of income?
Yeah, so that's where things get a little interesting.
Now, the IRS isn't stupid. They saw high-income earners buying rentals, creating these phantom losses, and using them against their W-2 income to wipe out their tax bill. So back in the 80s, they built a proverbial wall, Section 469 to be exact. And they basically split your income into two buckets. Bucket A is your active income, okay? This is your job, your sweat, the money that you actively work to make to live. And then there's bucket B, your passive income. Okay, in this instance, your rentals. And they made a rule. Passive losses can only offset passive income. And active losses can only offset active income. Meaning, if you lose $50,000 on paper from your rentals, you cannot use those to offset, let's say, your $150,000 salary from your active income W-2 job. And that proverbial tax wall stops you. And this is why your CPA always tells you,
You can't use these losses and they're suspended.
yeah, but why?
This is because every dollar you make goes into, as you said, bucket A or bucket B, non-passive versus passive. And by definition, real estate is passive. And so while you're earning money day to day at your job, that's non-passive. And over here on the real estate side, this is passive and you lose money. Those two cannot come together.
So I guess conceptually, help me understand what makes something active. Is it because you're working every single day? It's like your 9 to 5. It's like you're actively making money. I know that seems basic, but like, what is the idea behind the terminology?
2 words, material participation. The IRS, for something to be non-passive, wants you to be involved. You got to roll up your sleeves day to day. It's your main line of work is a good way to think about it.
Okay. And then passive with real estate. I guess it's kind of funny to me because real estate is so far from passive, but maybe that's just more from a social perspective and not necessarily from like a literal or financial perspective. But like, what makes something like real estate quote unquote passive when there's just so much that goes into running that side business?
More specifically, what the IRS is hinting to is that rental real estate is by definition and by nature passive, thinking that it's mailbox money. You're just going to be able to buy the property, find a tenant, sit back and collect a check. So that's why to them, at first, they're going to say that it's passive. So until you can prove that you meet certain rules to make it non-passive, it by definition will be passive.
So in a sense, it would be beneficial for passive income and active income to meet.
Exactly. But what you just said was passive income with active income. But remember, on the passive side with your real estate, we're showing paper losses. So let's say you have a household making $100,000 and they go out and buy a short-term rental that can drive a $20,000 paper loss. If I can get these 2 buckets to commingle, I now am only paying tax on $80,000. So that's why it's so powerful to prove those rules and meet those tests of material participation so I can get these 2 buckets to merge.
So there is a way for active and passive income to actually come together.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
The wealthy didn't want to wait 27 and a half to 39 years to get their tax break. They wanted it now. So the legislation was updated to include something called bonus depreciation. Now, bonus depreciation existed before, but it was slowly being phased out little by little, year after year. The big beautiful bill, and with there's this, what is this bird? Am I being trolled? It's the loudest bird of my life. And the big beautiful bill basically brought it back to life full bore. And what bonus depreciation does is instead of taking a small little slice of depreciation every single year, you're able to take a massive chunk of depreciation, which is sometimes 20, 30, or even 40% of the building value of your property, and deduct it all in the first year of placing it in service. Which, depending the property, could give you access to $80, $100, $150,000 of write-offs instantly.
So here's where it starts getting crazy is bonus depreciation. So in the example we used, you got $10,000 of an expense, remember that non-cash expense, in year 1. But that was just simply taking the entire building over 27 and a half or 39 years. The point of bonus depreciation is now, remember this building, some of the assets within that building are not going to live as long as the structure of the building itself. Your furniture, your fixtures, your carpentry, your cabinets, all of that. So the point is, if we can identify what that value is of those assets, those only last 5, 7, 15 years. And with bonus depreciation, assets that have a life of 20 years or less can be expensed in year 1.
And this is what you do with the cost segregation study. A cost segregation study goes into your property and identifies this, puts together a report that says, hey, your house is going to depreciate this, or bonus depreciate this amount. You give this to your CPA, you guys work all your magic, and effectively this kind of gets counted towards your income or against your income.
Correct. This is where if you had an accountant that wasn't familiar with real estate, they would take that building over 27 and a half or 39 years. But with a cost segregation study, we can put it on the tax return and break out those other assets and make sure that you get those depreciation deductions faster.
So this is back. This is like fully back because bonus depreciation was like, it was going away.
Yep. It was being phased out 20% every year, and the BBB, the Big Beautiful Bill, brought it back to 100%.
I know that there are a lot of different components to the Big Beautiful Bill, but this seems like pretty significant. Like a 100% write-off of bonus depreciation. Is that just like, why isn't it talked about more?
It's very significant, and I think the reason is because these two political parties, one side is less favorable towards these business owners and investors, and the other side is really trying to reward that sort of investing and behavior. And that's why prior rules were letting it phase out 20% a year. We would have been in 40% this year, but with the change, it brought it back to 100%.
And bonus is something that everybody can use.
Everyone can use bonus depreciation, so they can elect to depreciate those smaller items and do a cost segregation if they want to. What people misconceive is can they use the loss, that paper loss that is generated from that big bonus depreciation? Can they commingle the buckets, bucket A and bucket B?
So basically you're saying you can take bonus and have these massive write-offs and you'd be able to easily apply them to your passive income or your short-term rental income. It's really more that not everyone can use those passive losses and cross the bridge and use them against their W-2.
Yes, that is the ultimate goal. Anybody can do the cost segregation and the bonus depreciation. The $1 million question is, and where all of the tax savings lie, can you get your passive bucket to not be passive anymore and offset your non-passive, your day-to-day income? But I will say, there is a back door into this system.
I know what you're thinking, but that wall, it's still there, right? This is still considered passive income, isn't it? Well, here's a glitch in the system. That back door that I alluded to earlier. The tax code has a specific exception. If the average stay at your short-term rental is 7 days or less, and you materially participate in the management of that short-term rental by working and managing that property for 100 hours and more than any other individual, the IRS stops treating it like passive income and starts treating it more like active income. Suddenly that wall between your investments and your W-2 crumbles, and your short-term rental is now considered active income, meaning that those bonus depreciation losses, the ones intended for commercial developers, can flow right over and attack your W-2 tax bill.
This is how you have someone, for example, making 95 grand on a W-2, buying a short-term rental, say they take a $55,000 loss that they can use against their active income, and their tax bill goes from 20 grand to 5 grand because of that one property. And that's 15 grand in cold, hard cash tax savings.
50,000 obviously pretty achievable, but like in many cases, a lot of the bonus depreciation that I see ends up being like 100, 125. Because I think if you're buying a house that's like 400 to 600,000, bonus can be quite a bit larger than that, right?
Yes, that's a conservative number. As an accountant, most properties that we see, especially in the real estate space, you're going to get even more bonus depreciation than that.
Yeah, because actually one of the tests that I just ran that you guys did your magic on my taxes was like $119,000 of bonus depreciation, which for me is significant because at a 37% tax rate, I mean, that saved me $45,000 in taxes.
Yeah, and let's say in that example, you make $140,000 a year. Now you're taking $140,000 of loss, offsetting the $140,000 of income, and paying nothing in federal tax.
Man, and all you have to do is materially participate, which it's so not a passive business. I understand why it makes it active, because material participation is, you're basically saying, if you self-manage this, if you do the stuff that you're going to do as an Airbnb host anyways, and you work 2 hours a week at a minimum managing this property, and you work more than anyone else, like that is the entryway to pay $0 in taxes if you can replicate this strategy year after year.
Bingo. And remember, you can do it with more properties in 1 year. You're not held to only doing it with one property. You can do it with $1 million properties. You can do it with 5 single-family homes that are smaller in the Midwest. You have flexibility there.
Yeah, and just think about this. One of the things that, like, the compounding power of this particular strategy to me is, like, in this example I just gave you, all right, just because it's what True Books literally did for me. I saved $40,000. So I now have $40,000 that I can keep in my pocket. I owe it at some point, right? This isn't free money. We always say this, it's not a free lunch from the government. The government is, in my mind, giving me a interest-free loan. They're like, hey, you don't have to pay it back today. One day you will, unless I keep it and die and step up basis and all that stuff. But hey, I don't have to pay the $40,000 today. So now, what do I have? I have $40,000. And what's interesting to me is if I decided to buy a $400,000 property, I could go and get a 10% down loan and basically use my $40,000 of tax savings as my 10% down payment to buy another property that also cash flows for me, that I can also bonus depreciate. And it's just like, obviously you want to do this at a pace that makes sense for you and your skill, but like if you do this correctly, I mean, it just seems like you can really lower you can pay no taxes ever. And while this strategy is primed for building wealth, there is one big thing to keep in mind.
In the tax world, we call depreciation a temporary expense because you're getting it that year, but just as you said, recapture, when you sell that property, if you sell at a gain, you likely will have to pay back some of the depreciation that you took in previous years, or all of the depreciation. It will be included as income again. So
Okay.
yes.
So it's a big watch out, because if you think, oh yeah, I saved $40,000 in taxes, but you sell it the next year and you didn't plan for that, you're going to have to come up with, I mean, a very large sum of money to pay Uncle Sam back, basically, right?
Mm-hmm. And that's why you need to do planning before. Hey, does it make sense to take bonus depreciation? Hey, I bought 5 properties this year. Should I bonus depreciate all of them? Should I depreciate one of them?
But the idea is, if you're playing the game that the wealthy are playing, you're actively trying not to sell, or you're trying to kick the can down the road. And if you do sell, I think there's strategies there where you can take those gains and profits, put them into other properties without having to incur that tax bill. But now your tax liability is always kind of moving to the next property, so long as you're always like pushing the profit into more real estate, basically. Of course, with a relatively stringent set of rules on 1031 exchanges.
Yes, we typically say in life it's not good to push off your problems, but in tax, we're all about kicking the can down the road.
And with that, if today's topic interests you and you missed this entire series, well, you can catch it right here to get caught up. And I promise you, if you go down this list right here, I might change your perspective on a few things. So click there and forgot to put myself on mute. Go click that. I'll see you in those videos. All right, bye.